As Alpha is away for the challenge, the Moon River Pack is under attack by an army of rogues. Luna Allwen steps forward to lead her warriors in the defense of their home. It's a story of courage and sacrifice, with the safety of the home hanging by a thread. Welcome to the Alpha's Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Chapter 33 Preparation. The afternoon after they returned back from the human town, the response from Alpha Aaron arrived. To Alpha Landon, I accept your challenge. As agreed upon in the attached contract, the Alphas of the Silver Arrow and Moon River Pack will meet up on neutral grounds 2 weeks from now, accompanied by only our beaters and pack doctors. The victor will receive the honor of becoming the strongest Alpha and leader of the most powerful pack of the Evergreen Wilds. No cheating or assistance will be allowed. Regards, Alpha Aaron Young. Luna Allwen took over most duties for the Moon River Pack, as her mate prepared for the challenge. Alpha Landon was already rather strong on his own, and Allwen for one knew that he was more than a match for Aaron. But given Alpha Aaron would definitely not give up the prestigious strongest pack in the forest title so easily, they could not let their guard down. It did mean that Alpha Landon was usually either in the forests patrolling or training at the gym, and that Allwen only at most saw him at night, but she didn't mind. Especially given that they were only going to plan to start a family once this hurdle was overcome, it was imperative that they both devote all their effort to preparing for it. Josh and Kale made the decision to officially mark each other, the latter having become the pack's de facto head of security by now. His new system, including the abolishing of a number of blind spots some of the cameras previously had helped some of the Moon River Pack patrols identify and deal with possible disturbances, such as rogues that strayed too close to the borders. Josh had witnessed his beloved mate progress from a shy, quiet man who didn't know his place at all in a pack, to a shy quiet man that absolutely knew and owned his place. Elise had been discharged from the clinic and was still living with Josh and Kale, but Dr. Enzo had become a frequent visitor to their home as well. As part of her recovery and strengthening her connection with her wolf, Enzo had insisted on her bringing Ember on daily runs. Whether this was to truly benefit her health or allow him to spend more time with her was unclear. Regardless of how Enzo and Elise felt about each other, their wolves had been drawn to each other from day one. If not for the doctor's impressive self-control, his wolf Eston might have marked Elise while she was still recuperating in his bed, or even after the two humans had locked eyes during Allwen's lunar ceremony. During the course of it all, several families from the Silver Arrow Pack arrived at the vicinity. Luna Allwen was able to vouch for them as their former pack member, especially after an unexpected reunion with Jesse. Of course, they'd heard of the strong showing of the Moon River Pack at the function, and had willingly undertaken the long journey here. The pack suddenly needed to host a lot more new members, with Gamma Josh having his hands full with observing and screening each of them, even with the new programs Kale had come up with. It was here that Alpha Landon and Luna Allwen decided to implement something they had been considering for a few weeks now. Considering the Moon River Pack was slowly but surely going to grow in size, they would need to appoint more authority figures than just the three. The Moon River Committee was formed and split into two groups. The first were the Alpha subordinates Beta Elijah, Delta Cassidy, and Gamma Joshua. And the second were the Lunas Beta Stella, Delta Lincoln, and Gamma Marissa. The two factions could operate both separately and together depending on circumstances. Stella was pretty much a no-brainer. She had been training to be Beta her whole life, and was more than happy to work with Allwen in a professional setting once more. And though there were some concerns that her mate was also on the committee, their very passionate debates on their perspectives when it came to literature was more than proof that their relationship would not make them biased towards each other. Lincoln and Marissa had been screened along with several other possible candidates before being offered the posts. Lincoln was the best strategist amongst the pack warriors and had worked together with Cassidy on multiple occasions already. Marissa, on the other hand, was an Omega but an excellent healer who had volunteered at Dr. Enzo's clinic before. The appointment made waves on the online bulletin. The others had received former members of Alpha Aaron's pack, but not to the extent that the Moon River pack was getting now. It was estimated that given the amount that the Silver Arrow pack had lost, that the Moon River pack would reach almost twice their size in terms of population. With the official announcement of the upcoming challenge between Landon and Aaron, many were confident that Alpha Landon would come out on top. While not officially confirmed, Jessie also informed Olwen and Stella she had heard rumors of Kylie being rejected by Alpha Aaron and kicked out of the Silver Arrow pack. Karma, many said, for stealing someone else's mate and then trying to hurt another Luna at a peaceful event. But rather than the glee that Stella, Jessie and many other former pack members expressed at this, Olwen was merely indifferent. She'd stopped caring about Aaron and Kylie a long time ago, even before running into them at the function. They were in her past, and the Moon River pack was her future. Rather, the conversation she'd had with Priscilla back in Applewin, apparently, that was the town name, consumed most of the Luna's thoughts. She'd realized that Bradley was selfish and cruel, but hadn't known it had been to such a drastic extent that he would have cheated on the mate he claimed to be devoted to so much. And given the physical resemblance of Priscilla's children to Aaron and by extent his father, the proof could only speak for itself. But it explained so much. The descent of the Silver Arrow pack that the Moon Goddess had hinted to her about, Bradley's hidden affair must have been fairly significant to it. And the drugs that Oz revealed Aaron had used to numb his wolf whenever he slept with Kylie. It made sense to suggest that Bradley had done the same whenever he went to see Priscilla. That shed a whole new perspective on the supposed grief the then Alpha had gone through after the rogue attacks resulted in the death of Luna Tess. He'd had a toast in her name at the function that year, and even dedicated a whole wing of the library to her. Perhaps it was his guilt that he had indirectly caused his wife's death. No matter, this all meant that Felix and Tonya were Bradley's children and Aaron's younger half-siblings. To some extent they had claims to leadership as children of an Alpha, and Luna Olwen had offered to support the pair in any way she could regardless. To her surprise, however, while Priscilla appreciated the kindness, she politely turned her down. "We have everything we need," she assured her. "After we fled to Applewin, we found a way to settle down and blend in with humans. Tristan found a steady job, and we've managed to both provide for our kids and tell them their true heritage." She sighed and shook her head sadly. "I don't wish for my children to suffer the way my family and I did. The Evergreen Wilds is still a dangerous place to be for rogues, and the safety of my loved ones is far more important than me seeking revenge or justice." "Then why did you tell me all this?" "Because I wanted at least one pack member to hear and understand my story," Priscilla answered, her gaze filled with resolve. Alpha Bradley buried it beneath facades about rogues, and Keith and his followers twisted it into something else entirely to serve their purpose. No matter what happens to the Evergreen Wilds packs, I wanted one person to know. "I see. If you want to share my story with others, I won't stop you, but just don't tell them I'm here." Priscilla pressed her lips together. "I also heard of how Bradley's son was your fated mate, but he left you for another she-wolf. I wasn't surprised given his father, but you didn't deserve that. I hope you found happiness with Alpha Landon." Olwen smiled softly and nodded. "Thank you, Priscilla. And yes, I have found happiness with Landon." "That's good to hear." Priscilla smiled and glanced at the clock. "It's getting rather late. You should return to the motel before your mate starts to worry about you. But thank you for giving me a chance to speak." "It's no problem, Priscilla. I know you said you don't need any assistance, but if you ever do need something, contact me." Olwen had spent the remaining night walking back and lying in bed next to Landon, deep in thought. If what she had been told was right, then Bradley should have lost his Alpha post years ago. But other than the hint regarding the drug both him and his son had used, there was no concrete proof on their hands yet to seek an audience with the Alpha King himself. And with the challenge coming up, an accusation like this could look suspicious. All the more that the Silver Arrow Pack should be removed from their position of privilege. Landon had told her gently, cradling her in his arms. If Bradley has really done such a thing, we can focus on that after the challenge is over. I guess we should focus on one thing at a time. Olwen stared at the motel room ceiling, feeling the warmth of her mate's embrace. Am I doing a good job as the Luna? Landon chuckled softly, cupping her face and directing her gaze to his. Not many Lunas would have had to handle a function, preparing for a challenge, and a sudden surge in pack members within a few months. Given how new you are, you're handling things very well. Olwen relaxed slightly at the Alpha's reassuring words. You sure? Positive. Ask any of our pack members and they'll tell you the same thing. Landon placed a soft kiss on his wife's forehead. You've had to take over most administrative and daily procedures, and somehow you still have time to go to read to the school children and mediate pack disputes. I shall have to compensate you generously. His hand wandering down beneath the bedsheets made her jolt. Landon dash. The Alpha chuckled at her reaction and briefly withdrew his hand to cup her face. I promise I will be thinking of you and the rest of the Moon River Pack when I go for the challenge against Alpha Aaron. He swore, tenderness in his blue irises. He has his pride to fight for, but I have my family. He leaned in and kissed Olwen on the lips this time. Now don't think about all that tonight, Olwen. Just relax. His hand snuck back down before both Lark and Opal took over. Luna Olwen kept Priscilla's story to just Alpha Landon and Beta Stella for now. Until they got concrete evidence, they did not want to start further and unnecessary drama in the pack. Stella, who was discreetly more agitated by Bradley and Alpha Aaron, now agreed to conduct more research on the drug used, and draft an email to Alpha King Scott that they would aim to send after the challenge was over. Olwen had not met the Alpha King before. Alpha King Scott and Luna Queen Isla were the royal family that oversaw all the pack regions in their continent, and at most visited the Evergreen Wilds once a year. At most, Bradley had definitely met them when he was Alpha, when the couple had made rounds to check in on each pack after the rogue attacks. The Alpha King was the only wolf in the country who could use an Alpha command, and in this case it was possible to extract a confession from a guilty party if he needed. But in the meantime, for the next week, life carried on as per normal, with a few surprises. A surprising amount of unmated wolves formerly of the Silver Arrow Pack found their fated ones in their new home. For one, Jessie and Olwen had become actual friends after she had arrived at the Moon River Pack, the former admitting that she was responsible for the mass desertion of the Silver Arrow Pack. While Luna Olwen was concerned after hearing all the verbal abuse and mistreatment the other had endured under Luna Kylie, she was glad to hear that Jessie was doing better these days. Jessie was also growing close to Marissa, who'd treated a few injuries she'd sustained while in the wilds. Now safely free from the overbearing she-wolf's clutches, Jessie could relax. She was relieved and warmed to realize that the Moon River Pack did not perceive nor treat Omegas the way her old pack had, and began to exercise and practice at the training center as much as she liked, sometimes even with Olwen. But even after all the instances of her friends and loved ones around her finding their mates, Luna Olwen still found herself surprised. She and Jessie paused in the middle of a sparring session as Delta Cassidy and Delta Lincoln both came in, Lincoln's eyes fixated only on Jessie. Mate Lincoln growled, as the Omega gasped and jumped into his arms. Olwen was admittedly dumbfounded as Cassidy seriously could nothing faze this woman. Smirked. Do you two need some time alone? It was a late Friday night, after Landon had finished his training for that day, that he and Luna Olwen received a stunned mind link from Lincoln. Alpha Luna, we found a wolf at the south border. He's exhausted and barely moving. Is he a rogue? Landon's voice broke through the link cautiously. No, but I'm not sure what you will think of this. Lincoln seemed to hesitate before he went on. It's Beta Caden. Or at least his wolf. He's drenched. Alpha Landon informed Luna Olwen to stay put while he went to investigate the issue. And sure enough, the moment the wet and shivering wolf saw the Alpha approach, he shifted back into his human form. Alpha Landon. Beta Caden gasped out, looking borderline delirious with a panicked expression on his face as he stared up at him. I know we've had our differences, but you have to listen to me. You have to delay the challenge Aaron and his father are planning to. He didn't finish before he slumped over. He's exhausted. Dr. Enzo said, as Lincoln threw a blanket around Beta Caden and motioned for a few warriors to help load him onto a stretcher. It looks like he exerted himself consistently for a few days straight and waited for the Alpha to get here before he finally succumbed to his fatigue. Bring him to the clinic, but observe him at all times. We have to wait and listen to what he says once he awakes. Landon instructed Lincoln and Enzo, who both gave him a sharp nod and did as he said. During the one day that Beta Caden was still out, with his wolf heavy lifting to recuperate him, the Moon River Committee was in deep, cautious discussion considering his abrupt appearance. It has been barely 2 months since the function, and we've heard nothing from the Silver Arrow Pack other than Alpha Aaron accepting the challenge. Beta Elijah pointed out. I wouldn't be surprised if the Silver Arrow Pack isn't being truthful about things. Beta Stella snorted, being one of the few who knew more about that in the room. They are still silent on the whole losing half of their members thing, not to mention the rumors of Luna Kylie being banished. She was trying to hide that she was a little concerned for her father given his current state, but after he'd made the choice to stay with the Silver Arrow Pack when they'd last talked, she was prepared to cut ties with him once and for all if something more occurred. Fortunately, no further speculation would be made once Dr. Enzo sent a mind link informing Landon and Olwen that Beta Caden was awake. The pair made their way quickly to the pack clinic, where Caden was propped up on a few pillows. He seemed to have recovered slightly from his exhaustive trip here. According to Enzo, he had spent the past few days cutting straight across the wilds from the Silver Arrow Pack, including hours of swimming. He bowed his head slightly as Landon and Olwen approached. Alpha. Luna. Beta Caden, I hope you are feeling better. Alpha Landon spoke. I am. But I had to come and warn you. You have to delay the challenge. Landon tilted his head warily at Caden. What do you mean? The contract states that the Alphas of the Silver Arrow Pack and the Moon River Pack will meet for the challenge. The Beta spoke. So Aaron and Bradley made a deal. Aaron relinquished the Alpha title to his father until the challenge is over, so that Bradley will fight Landon instead. What? Disbelief flashed through Alpha Landon's eyes. But the transfer of the Alpha title, especially not by means of retirement or death, needs approval and witnessing by the Beta, Delta and Gamma of the pack. Luna Olwen said, staring at Caden with a conflicted look. Surely Delta Jace and Gamma Edric would not have stood for this. At those words, sorrow filled Caden's expression, and his gaze dropped down to the floor. When he next talked, his words were quieter and shaky. Jace and Edric are both dead. Chapter 34 Penitence. Some time ago. Caden frowned as he headed to the Alpha's office that morning, having been summoned. Ever since they'd returned from the function, he hadn't received much of an order from Alpha Aaron. The latest update he'd heard the day before was that Luna Kylie had been rejected and exiled from the Silver Arrow Pack. Bradley, who had taken over most of the work while they were away, had also not been at his most approachable after the whole losing half of the pack thing. And to make things worse, the remainder that stayed had ignored or talked down to their Alpha and ex-Luna after hearing of Kylie's stunt at the function. Caden didn't question Alpha Aaron's decision, however. As much as he had tried to put up with her, Kylie was a terrible Luna, and it seemed that her outrageous attempt to pierce Luna Olwen with Wolfsbane had finally been the last straw for her chosen mate. Believe it or not though, that was not the most pressing thing on Caden's mind. He'd lost all hope of finding his family after they cut ties with the Silver Arrow Pack, only for his daughter to reappear mated to the Moon River Pack beater, and Olwen to be their new Luna. It stung to realize this, but Stella was a lot happier in her new environment, and with her mate than she had been during her last few months in the Silver Arrow Pack once her best friend had left. He deserved the treatment he received from her, especially after her demand that he leave their old pack. Why hadn't he said yes? Perhaps he had hoped for more time to think over things. He'd been training to be the beater of the Silver Arrow Pack for years before actually becoming the beater, and serving Alpha Bradley, his childhood friend, and then Bradley's son. Things had been bad enough as it was, and his reluctance to leave behind the pack he'd dedicated his life to only led to him pushing not only Stella, but Kale and Sylvie further away. It hadn't escaped him that he had smelled their scents around the pack, as he watched over an unconscious Kylie, but never saw them in person aside from Stella. His daughter had been right though. The Silver Arrow Pack had started falling apart before the function, and it was only worse now. The hope of maintaining or even saving what dignity was left was quickly slipping out of his grasp. Caden headed down the corridor and knocked the door of the Alpha's office. "Come in," came Aaron's voice. Beta Caden turned the doorknob and went in, seeing Alpha Aaron and Bradley already inside. Much to his confusion, 2 other pack members were also standing with them, warriors Pauli and Zeno. "Alpha." He bowed his head to Aaron before his eyes flickered to Bradley, and then the 2 warriors. Why are Pauli and Zeno here?" Aaron's eyes flickered towards his father for a heartbeat before settling back on Beta Caden. "I received a message from Alpha Landon of the Moon River Pack late last night. He is requesting for a challenge." Now this was news, not unexpected but news nonetheless. "I see, have you responded?" "After some deep discussions with my father, yes," Aaron replied, his tone and expression unreadable. "We came up with a solution that will allow us to overcome this obstacle." Caden tilted his head curiously. He'd seen Alpha Landon multiple times, and the man was strong. Yes, Aaron was too, but he imagined they were pretty closely matched. What made Aaron confident he would defeat the other Alpha? The question was most likely already written on Caden's face, as Aaron motioned to his father, who cleared his throat. "As capable as my son is, he is still having issues with his wolf." Bradley spoke, casting Aaron a sideways glare. "So for the duration of the challenge, Aaron has agreed to briefly relinquish the Alpha title to me." "What?" Caden looked at Bradley and then Aaron, confused and taken aback. "Isn't that considered cheating?" Bradley chuckles and shakes his head. "The contract states that the challenge is between the Alpha of the Silver Arrow Pack and the Alpha of the Moon River Pack. They don't state names, and thus while he could sign the contract as Alpha Aaron, the arrangement will still be considered valid, as he was Alpha at the time it was signed, even if he is not the Alpha at the time of the challenge." Caden wanted to protest some more, but the expression on Bradley's face made him decide to address something else. "That doesn't exactly answer my question though, Alpha Aaron." Caden knew the transfer of the Alpha title, aside from by death or retirement, could only be carried out with the presence and consent of the Beta, Delta and Gamma. Something flashed in Aaron's eyes. "Pauli and Zeno are the new Delta and Gamma of the Silver Arrow Pack." Caden's eyes widened in surprise, and he briefly glanced at the 2 men. He knew of their strength and power in combat, but right now they just stared at the carpeted floor and seemed to be trying to make themselves as invisible as possible. What happened to Delta Jace and Gamma Edric? Jace and Edric were found dead in the forest, towards the north entrance last night. Bradley cut in before Aaron could reply. The man's face looked solemn, but devoid of genuine sadness or grief. "It seems that some rogues attempted to invade the Silver Arrow Pack while everyone was asleep. Jace and Edric fought bravely, but they could have been taken by surprise. When Aaron found them, both their necks had been snapped." Beta Caden had his heart in his throat, as he heard Bradley speak. That didn't sound like Delta Jace and Gamma Edric at all. They were rather capable fighters, he'd seen them train himself. He couldn't envision them being killed by rogues unless they were exceptionally strong or of large numbers. Their families have been quietly notified, and their bodies have been given a personal burial. Aaron went on. I thought it best not to announce it formally given the current state of the pack. But as tragic as the loss of Jace and Edric are, Aaron continued. With the challenge quickly approaching, the transfer of the Alpha title must happen now. Caden hesitated. I understand the urgency, but wouldn't it have been better to inform me of this earlier, or discuss it with me even? We didn't think there was a need. Objectively speaking, transferring the title is the best option we have now. Bradley said, watching Caden with an intent look. And given you've served me and now Alpha Aaron, I didn't think you would object, isn't that correct? The last part of that question seemed to echo through the office, making the new Delta and Gamma shrink in on themselves even more. No major objections, Bradley and Alpha Aaron. Caden spoke slowly, addressing them with a measured expression. But could you at least give me a few hours to absorb all of this information? It's a lot to take in at once. Aaron and Bradley exchanged a look before Aaron answered. Very well. We expect to see you back in this office at 6 in the evening. And Aaron, while I head out of the Silver Arrow pack, use the precious time to appoint a more capable Luna. Bradley said sternly. Time is of the essence. Yes, Dad. Something flickered through Aaron's green eyes, but disappeared just as quickly. This pack will have a better Luna by the time you return. Yes, Alpha. Caden bowed and turned and left the room. He made it back through the hallway and into the lift, and as soon as the elevator doors closed, he felt his knees buckle slightly and had to prop himself up by the wall. Nevertheless, he knew where he had to look. Gamma Edric hadn't found his mate yet at the time of his death, and the rest of his family had already departed for another pack with the others while the Alpha, Luna and Beta were away. That left Delta Jace's family, and after taking a brief detour to buy a small bouquet of condolences flowers, Beta Caden headed for the home. Jace's mate Maya opened the door with puffy eyes and a weak smile, cradling their son Eddie in her arms. Beta Caden's heart broke at the sight. Maya. May I come in? Maya hesitated briefly, her eyes flickering behind and around the Beta before she nodded warily. She quietly stepped aside and closed the door, as Caden walked into the dining room and sat down. Alpha Aaron told me what happened. I'm so sorry for your loss. Jace was a good man, and a strong member of our pack. Maya's eyes didn't meet his as she stared at the table in front of them. Thank you. Alpha Aaron informed me to keep things quiet for now. She said nothing more, but produced a folded piece of paper and pushed it across the table to the Beta. Beta Caden grasped the paper and unfolded it, immediately recognizing Delta Jace's handwriting. My dear Maya, I have been summoned out to the north entrance of Pack territory by Alpha Aaron. Whatever happens to me, just take care of our son. As much as I fear what could occur to him if he left this pack, at such a vulnerable stage of his life, staying could be worse. I trust your judgment, Maya. Whatever you choose to do, remember to keep our son safe. I love you both. Jace? Caden swallowed thickly upon seeing the letter before pushing it gently back to Maya. I understand. Please have a good evening. He stood up, bowing to Maya and her infant son one final time before leaving. He wasn't surprised that Jace and Edric had been summoned to the north entrance rather than having gone there of their own accord, but he had to be sure. He recalled that the entrance had a camera hidden at the gate, so surely there must have been some footage of whatever happened, right? Caden quietly made his way through the edge of Pack territory, with his wolf Corson, using his dark grey pelt to camouflage himself under the shade of the trees. Once the north entrance came in sight, he shifted back and bundled the cloak around before approaching. He knew where the camera was, and if he could speak to or distract the guard on duty somehow, he could see if the camera footage had been tampered with or removed. As he approached the area though, he frowned when he realized that there was no one stationed there. Just moments before a familiar scent came to his nose and the older man stepped out from behind a tree, having cloaked his scent. "Don't worry, I sent the guard away 5 minutes ago." Bradley spoke far too casually, approaching his friend. Feeling Coulson emit a warning growl within him, Caden tensed. Of course they'd known he was having second thoughts the moment he suggested giving him some time to think. "It was you, wasn't it?" he asked, feeling a torrent of emotions warring at each other. He didn't even need to clarify before Bradley nonchalantly nodded, pushing himself off the tree trunk. "I knew Delta Jace and Gamma Edric would be more hesitant in agreeing to our methods in winning the challenge against the Alpha of the Moon River Pack," he said, taking a few steps towards Caden. "So with my son's permission I took some precautions." Caden couldn't control the rage and grief that was bubbling up beneath the surface. "You trained both Jace and Edric yourself. We practically watched them grow before they were appointed Delta and Gamma." "Perhaps." Bradley's face remained impassive. "But the Silver Arrow Pack has fallen on desperate times, and the pack does not need individuals who don't understand the importance of survival." Coulson growled even more loudly at Bradley's lack of guilt over what he had done. Bradley Caden couldn't believe it had taken him so long to finally say this, but he absolutely had to now. "Haven't you ever thought that sometimes it's better to admit defeat?" "Excuse me." Bradley's eyes flashed as he began to slowly stalk towards him. Caden recognized that expression and movement, but never had it been directed at him. But he knew he couldn't stop now and had to let it all out. "All this happened because of you and Aaron." He began to snarl, his eyes shifting to Coulson's. "If your son hadn't chosen to cheat on his fated mate and you hadn't chosen to cover up for him, the Silver Arrow Pack would still be thriving. Olwen wouldn't have left, that terrible she-wolf wouldn't have become Luna, and my daughter wouldn't have had the dirt she needed to turn the rest of the pack against you and your son, as you claimed." Bradley shot forward and grabbed both sides of Caden's head, his eyes dark as he silently threatened to do what he had done to his 2 previous victims. Olwen was the first Omega that had been fated to a Silver Arrow Pack Alpha. He replied with a low, cruel voice. "All I did was for the pack. How would the rest of the wilds have seen us? Better than how they see us now, after Luna Kylie embarrassed us at the function." Caden argued, his hands grasping Bradley's arms and attempting to pry them off his head. "There is nothing at all wrong with having an Omega as a Luna. Omegas are weak, you sentimental fool." The Alpha boomed, and before Caden could realize what was happening his arms were pushed back and Bradley's fist connected with his jaw. The Beta stumbled back, wincing but forcing the pain down. "What a disappointment, Caden." Bradley spoke, continuing to step towards him menacingly. "I thought we were on the same side for this. You still have one more chance, otherwise you'll join our former Delta and Gamma." Beta Caden inhaled and exhaled, his heart thudding in his chest. A moment of silence passed. "I, Caden Anderson, renounce my position as Beta and member of the Silver Arrow Pack." "Very well." Bradley shifted into Bastion and lunged at Caden. Caden quickly shifted as well, Coulson colliding with Bastion in the middle, the 2 large wolves gnashing and clawing at one another viciously. While Caden's training and power as a Beta gave him an advantage compared to Jace and Edric against his former Alpha, Bradley was still ruthless and strong. Every attack that Coulson fought to block and retaliate with his own, the more Coulson attempted to land a bite or a scratch on the other's flank, the fiercer Bastion became. The dark-furred wolf bit back a howl of pain as a clump of fur was torn from his shoulder, Bastion's teeth sinking into his flesh and drawing red water. Despite both Caden and his wolf fighting bravely, Coulson eventually lay red-wateried and exhausted. He hadn't had to fight like this in years, but they could not die here. The image of Sylvie and Soren flashed through their mind, as well as Stella and Kale. They had so much left to live for. Nevertheless, the wolf was losing red water fast, the red liquid staining his fur and the grass around him. Bastion circled Coulson, snarling and closing in for the kill. "I will give you all the strength I have left," Caden told his wolf as Coulson's flank rose and fell shallowly. "We don't have to win against Bradley and Bastion, we just have to stay alive. For the sake of our mate and our family. I failed them many times, but that ends now. Heal, stay awake, whatever you need to do, we have to warn the Moon River Pack." Coulson quietly emitted a snort, already channeling some of that strength to heal their wounds more quickly. "Took you long enough." Using both his humans and his own energy, Caden's wolf also suppressed the excruciating pain he was in and shot to his paws, tearing away and out of the borders of the Silver Arrow Pack. Bradley shifted back into his regular form, seeing the trail of red water his now former friend had left behind in his wake. He snorted and shook his head. It was a shame that he had to do such a thing to the man whom he had been friends with growing up, and who had been his loyal beater for years. But it had to be this way, or the Silver Arrow Pack would be well and truly done for. He knew where he had injured Caden. If the man and his wolf didn't bleed to death, they would most likely collapse of exhaustion, or get finished off by some rogues. With that, Bradley turned to find the nearest water source, where he could wash off the red water staining his hands. "Alpha Aaron, send someone to clean up the red water near the north entrance." He mind-linked his son. "And arrange for the appointment of a new beater." Chapter 35 Penance. Before the challenge was administered, you mentioned Alpha Aaron had reached out to Alpha Frederick for a possible cooperation. Did anything become of that? No. They corresponded for a while, but once the challenge was made public, Alpha Frederick retracted any possibility of the Night Ridge Pack assisting the Silver Arrow Pack. When Caden had finished relating his story to Alpha Landon and Luna Olwen, a period of silence passed on through the hospital room, save for the quiet beeping of the ex-beater's heart monitor. "I'm inclined to believe you." Alpha Landon spoke first, enunciating himself slowly as his brain processed the information. "But I'm sure you know that as the former beater of the Silver Arrow Pack, we don't know how trustworthy you are." Caden bowed his head, shame filling his face. "I understand. Things happened so quickly, and I failed to take action earlier when everything was already going wrong. But I now know that however Aaron and Bradley will go about this, they will do whatever they can to gain an advantage or sway the challenge in their favor. Are you prepared to face whichever Alpha will meet you in the fight?" Landon turned and exchanged a look with Olwen, who was gazing back at him with concern in her eyes. The Alpha's heart softened towards his mate. She'd had to go through so much, and she'd only been the Luna for a few months, all because of her former mate and his father. If Caden was telling the truth and Bradley really had killed both Delta Jace and Gamma Edric, then Landon could expect the man to be out for red water if he were to come up against him in the challenge. Coupled with the possibility that he'd had an affair while Luna Tess had still been alive before ejecting his mistress while she was pregnant with twins off of Pack territory, Bradley had turned to a much more darker path than Landon had ever thought. And by having given the order to his subordinates that led to their demise, it made Aaron at least an accessory, and at worst partner in crime in regards to his father. Landon couldn't help feeling somewhat disappointed in the other Alpha. He would have thought Aaron would know better than this. Landon briefly weighed his options. He could delay the challenge like Caden had warned him to, but he could only hold off on it for so long, and who knew what else Aaron and Bradley would resort to. With the small numbers that their pack had dwindled to, it made sense that they would resort to more desperate methods. "I think that the challenge shall go ahead," he decided aloud, causing Caden and Olwen to stare at him in disbelief. Landon, Olwen said, unable to hide the nervousness in her voice. The Alpha gently took his mate's hands in his, fixating his soft gaze on hers. "This may be the best option we have in dealing with what is left of the Silver Arrow Pack. They may not wish to fight fair, but we will, because we have something actually worth fighting for." Determination flashed in Landon's blue eyes as he cupped Olwen's face. "It won't be me that just becomes the strongest alpha in the evergreen wilds, but as my mate you will become the strongest Luna. We could change the packs here for the better in so many ways, and I know that it all rides on this challenge." He kissed Olwen's forehead. "I've trained for weeks after sending that challenge to Alpha Aaron, and I'm slightly more familiar with Alpha Bradley's style in battle. He seeks to bleed his opponents out, and if I can block him from attacking those parts of my wolf I can wear him down." "That makes sense. It matches how I've seen Alpha Bradley fight before." Olwen agreed. She hadn't sparred with Bradley at all, but she'd seen the way he trained the pack warriors. "I can help you with that once I have recovered." Caden spoke up. "It is the least I can do for all that has happened." Alpha Landon turned and studied the former beta for a heartbeat. "Any help would be appreciated. If you report anything to the Silver Arrow Pack, however, I swear that I won't," Caden said firmly, sitting up straight in the bed. "If I betray you, you are free to cut me out of the pack or have me killed." Landon raised an eyebrow at this and only gave a nod. "Rest well for now. Thank you for informing us of this, Mr. Anderson." Alpha Landon and Luna Olwen stepped out of the room, with Dr. Enzo waiting for them outside. "I'll observe him for a few more days. His human self has recuperated quickly, but his wolf will need some time to fully regain his strength." "Thank you, Dr. Enzo. If anything happens, tell us." Luna Olwen smiled gratefully at him before they both left the clinic together. "You're sure about going ahead with the challenge after what Caden told us?" she asked Landon. "Yes, but I just found you," Olwen whispered, her irises unable to hide the fear that finally bled onto her face. Landon's heart cracked as he felt Olwen's anxiety, like whining protectively. He knew Olwen had been trying to keep up strong appearances since they'd confirmed the challenge, but with the added worry from him facing Alpha Bradley, who had just killed two of the strongest warriors she'd known from the Silver Arrow Pack, she couldn't hold in her own concerns much longer. "And I'll still be here," Landon assured her, gazing deeply into her eyes. "I meant what I said. I want to start a family with you one day, when this is all over." He pulled her into a tight embrace. "Even though I won't be able to accompany you to the challenge grounds, I'll be there in spirit to cheer you on," Olwen whispered to him, making warmth well up within him. "And I trust that while Beta Elijah and I are away, you'll watch over the rest of the pack." "Of course." She nodded, knowing Landon was speaking to her like this in a way to assure her that he would return to her side. "I'm already blessed that the moon goddess allowed you to form a new mate bond with me," the Alpha murmured, his head on hers. "I won't waste our second chance." Inhaling her mate's scent, Olwen relaxed, a jittery opal purring wistfully within. "Mr. Anderson." Several hours later in the evening, Dr. Enzo knocked and then poked his head into Caden's hospital room. Caden, who had been napping since Landon and Olwen had left to help his wolf recover his strength, awoke and sat up. "You have visitors." A small flicker of hope rose within the man, but he quickly crushed it. "Send them in." He expected it to be either Landon or Olwen again, asking some more details to test the credibility of his tale, only to be greeted by a few faces he hadn't seen in a while. "Dad," the now beta Stella said, being the first to step into the room. Following her was Kale, looking far more put together than he ever had been in the Silver Arrow, and Sylvie. His mate looked as radiant as ever, her dark hair tied into a windswept bun, and a pastel floral dress that she appeared to have bought at the Moon River Pack. Her expression was unreadable, though Corson howled with longing when her sweet scent reached him. "Beta Stella, Kale, Sylvie," Caden said, his eyes passing over each member of his family with surprise. The three came to stand by his bedside, but stayed out of his reach by an arm's length, which was understandable. "I didn't think any of you would want to see me." Caden said quietly. Stella's gaze briefly met his before dropping to the floor. I considered not doing so. But after having a conversation with Luna Olwen, and then my brother and mother, we decided to come here together. I see. Caden's eyes flickered over to his son, who looked at the ground as well, before gazing up at his wife. Sylvie, you're here. He breathed softly. I am. The woman replied, making no move to approach him. Corson was still whining for his mate, and Caden could see Sylvie's eyes change briefly to Soren's, but she kept her wolf away. The former beater listened to the silence from the three of them, before he inhaled. He had a lot he had to say after all. I'm sorry for not standing up for any of you for Olwen. He spoke. I let my former friendship with Alpha Bradley and comfort with my life, as the beater of the Silver Arrow Pack, blind me to what was right. I should have told him that covering for what his son did was wrong, and that he shouldn't have exiled Olwen for something that wasn't her fault. Okay. Stella said, crossing her arms. Caden pressed on, knowing that wouldn't suffice. He addressed his daughter first. I should have left the Silver Arrow Pack sooner, and maybe come look for you all instead of needing the function to find out what had happened. I was a coward. You gave me another chance to take the leap, and do something right for once, and I couldn't take it until it was too late. I haven't been in the Moon River Pack for long since your appointment, but I already know that I'm not as half as capable of a beater as you are. He turned to Sylvie. You were right all along. Olwen became part of our family after her own parents died, and I should have looked out for her. I'm relieved and happy to see her with everything she deserves, but it was no thanks to me. What Aaron and Bradley did was no example of loyalty, and neither was what I did when I hid the truth from you. Saving the biggest apology for last, he looked at his son. Cale, after you departed, you left behind a lot of your notes and programming materials. He began. With an empty house, and nothing to do but drink, eat and reflect on his actions, Caden had ventured into the basement at some point and found himself face to face with the intricate computer system his son had left, minus any indication on how to make them work since Cale couldn't give away all his expertise after the email leaking incident. The work you do both from the Silver Arrow Pack and for the Moon River Pack is unlike anything I've ever seen. You were able to help uncover and broadcast the truth of Aaron and Kyla's affair to everyone in the pack, and didn't even back down when Bradley threatened you. I may not understand what you love to do, but it was no excuse for me to overlook you. You may not be the best warrior or have the strongest wolf, but I shouldn't have put all my expectations on your physical strength. I see now that you are just as capable as anyone else regardless. He had the most distant relationship with Cale out of everyone here, and he saw the expression on the man's face. He hadn't expected to ever hear his father say that to him. If you all don't want to do anything with me ever again, then I understand. Caden went on quietly. But given everything that has gone down, I thought it would be better to say all of this now, while I still have the opportunity. And if you do decide to give me another chance, I'll do all I can to earn back your trust. The three of them looked at him, some parts pity, some parts wistfulness, some parts hesitation. They exchanged glances, mind-linking for what seemed like an eternity before Sylvie took a tentative step forward. We heard that you pushed both yourself and your wolf to the very brink to escape Bradley, and arrive here to warn the Moon River Pack. She said. It doesn't make up for everything that has happened, but I suppose for the moment, we can forgive you. But that doesn't mean that we are a complete family again. Cale added, crossing his arms. You still have a long way to go to truly mend your relationship with us. Caden responded to all this with toned-down relief. I understand. Thank you all for this. I promise I won't let you down this time. The former beater half expected the three of them to bid him good night and leave after this, but instead, they stepped aside. I suppose we might as well formally introduce you to our mates. Stella said, allowing the two figures to enter the room. She gently grasped Elijah's shoulder, as he came in and dipped his head. They'd seen each other during the function and had interacted as fellow beaters briefly in the year before, but this was the first time Elijah would be formally introduced to Caden as his daughter's mate. "Dad, this my mate beater Elijah." Caden managed a tired smile despite his state and returned Elijah's nod. It hadn't gone past him at the function that Elijah and Stella now had marks on their necks. They matched each other perfectly, right down to the accents in their clothes. The moon goddess had blessed his daughter indeed. "And Dad, this is my mate," Cale spoke, gently taking Josh's hand and guiding them both forward. "Gamma Joshua." Everyone in the clinic room seemed to hold their breath, as Joshua bowed his head to a visibly surprised Caden. "Mr. Anderson." "Gamma Josh, you are my son's mate." Caden's expression was clearly one bursting with questions, as he looked at Cale, who pushed up his glasses and steeled his face before nodding. "He is." Josh raised his head, and the couple tensed a little as the former beater studied them both. And then Caden smiled as well and bowed his head to the Gamma. "Gamma Josh. It is a pleasure to officially be introduced to you. I hope you and my son are happy together." The others silently released a collective sigh of relief for now, seeing Joshua and Cale's faces relax as Caden asked the couple a few questions on how they had met. Sylvie stayed put near the doorway, with Soren purring happily, as she inhaled what she could of Caden and Corson's scent. "Baby steps," Sylvie reminded her wolf, gazing quietly at her husband. Despite it being late, after the revelation that Caden had brought to the pack, Olwen had headed straight to her usual area at the gym to carry out her training. She didn't necessarily need Delta Cassidy's guidance now, but as she punched and kicked the dummy in front of her, her mind was elsewhere. Before she'd talked to the moon goddess, the conversation had given her confidence that she had ended up rightfully where she was supposed to be. She had gained a new pack and a new mate, and became their Luna. But now, hearing Bradley had made use of a loophole to take his son's place in fighting Alpha Landon unnerved her despite Landon's reassurances. She recalled the moon goddess's wording. "One way or another you were perhaps just always meant to be the Luna of the strongest pack in the Evergreen Wilds." She had mentioned Olwen still being the Luna, but not the pack she was in charge of. Olwen had faith in her mate, she truly did, but there was still a small, nagging part of her brain that kept reminding her of the worst-case scenario. Opal pushed the thoughts out of her head. She'd been in her honeymoon phase since Landon and Olwen had marked one another, but now she was here to snap her human back to the present. The moon goddess also said for you not to worry. Landon will come home to us. I hope so. Olwen sighed and wiped the sweat from her forehead with a towel. She was about to get up and go for another round of practice, when a soft voice greeted her from behind. "Good evening, Luna Olwen." The Luna stopped and turned to see Jessie and Elise approaching her, both dressed in gym clothes. "Oh, good evening, Elise." Jessie. Elise had recuperated pretty well after the Wolfsbane incident, but she had never come to this level of the gym before this. Up until recently, she'd only exercised to remain fit, but never trained to fight. Olwen was even more taken aback to see a group of other young women trailing behind the two. They were all Omegas, judging from the sweet scents. "Why are you all here?" The group exchanged glances before Elise spoke meekly. "We were hoping you would train us." Olwen raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Train? We heard from Delta Cassidy on how you picked up her fighting tactics so quickly after coming here." One of the Omegas behind explained. "We usually don't train ourselves in combat, but with the challenge coming up and the possibility of the Moon River Pack taking over the position of the Silver Arrow Pack, we decided to improve our fighting skills. And if our Luna can do it, why not us? I've finally decided that I want to be able to learn how to fight." Elise piped up softly. "My parents always told me I was too fragile, too gentle, and that I didn't need to learn how to push back enemies in combat. And you remember how Omegas were treated back in the Silver Arrow Pack. Jessie said, sharing a look with the Luna. Despite her initial surprise, Olwen stepped back from the dummy and gestured with her head to the others. I still wouldn't consider myself the most proficient fighter, but I'll try my best to teach all of you what I know. As the first of many training sessions began, the Luna wondered why a part of her was feeling rather emotional. The dingy town was on the very fringe of the evergreen wilds. It had been abandoned by its human occupants decades ago after a fire, and was now occupied by rogues. Rogues didn't take kindly to strangers trespassing on their territory, especially pack members. So when an unfamiliar woman with amber eyes entered their midst, a collective growl went through the area. Those that had been designated as guards shifted to attack her, only to be matched evenly in less than a few seconds, as she shifted too, inflicting scratches, bite marks and painful-looking wounds on some of them that caused a few to whimper and retreat. More wolves joined in the brief scuffle before a howl silenced all of them. The town's designated leader stalked towards her, holding up his hand. Everyone stand down. As the woman shifted back, he tossed a piece of sackcloth to cover herself for now. Even though he was a rogue, the aura he emanated was impressively close to that of an alpha. His eyes stared impassively at the intruder. She was admittedly beautiful, with a wonderfully refreshing green apple scent, but he had seen this face before. I recognize you. You were the Luna of the Silver Arrow Pack. He said suspiciously, as more threatening snarls arose from the onlookers. You have no business being here. I was the Luna. The woman spat, looking up and her eyes briefly flashing to her wolves as her face twisted into anger and bitterness. My mate cast me aside for another woman. The man standing over her scoffed. As if we haven't heard that before. Give me a good reason why I shouldn't have you thrown out or killed. The woman smirked at him confidently. Firstly, I was once one of the Silver Arrow Pack's strongest warriors, and could probably take on your pack and survive. More disdainful growls from the surrounding rogues, as their leader held up his hand to pause them. And secondly, I'm prepared to make a deal. The man narrowed his eyes. What deal? I'm sure rogues have their own way of following the official pack networks, and so you know that the Silver Arrow Pack is doomed to fail. The she-wolf spoke, staring up at him with a calculating smile. So I'm prepared to work together with you. Help me kill Alpha Landon and Luna Olwen, and we will take over the Moon River Pack. Chapter 36 Swarmed. The challenge was to take place in a stretch of neutral ground situated directly in the heart of the evergreen wilds. Accompanied only by Beta Elijah, Landon prepared to depart once the morning came. Before he left, he embraced both his parents, who hugged him back tightly with tears in their eyes. Be careful. Wendell spoke to his son, patting his shoulder before Holly gently touched Landon's cheeks with a hopeful, but nevertheless worried smile. Jasper and Nicole were similarly hugging Beta Elijah goodbye, with Beta Stella kissing him on the cheek and promising to help Luna Olwen, and the others look out for the Moon River Pack while he was gone. Finally, standing at the main gates of Pack territory, Alpha Landon bid farewell to his mate as the other Pack members looked on with trepidation for what was to come. I'll be back before you know it. Landon murmured into her ear, gently kissing the top of her head. Olwen felt him inhale softly, probably taking in her scent one more time before he left. She did the same, and briefly her mind took her back to the very first night they met. Alpha Landon, with his dirty blonde hair and blue eyes, seemingly put together, but with that hint of melancholy behind his gaze. She owed so much to him. I love you, Olwen. Landon rumbled, his eyes changing to larks for a second. In return, Olwen felt opal purr as their mate ran a hand through her soft brown hair. Olwen wanted to say it back immediately, return the emotions that she indeed reciprocated, but instead she held it in. She separated from Alpha Landon slowly and cupped his cheek. Come home to me, and I'll say it back. She whispered, her face filled with resolve. Landon's face grew solemn, and he gave her a decisive nod before he and Beta Elijah waved to the others and got into the car. As the vehicle drove away and slowly shrunk off to a dot on the forest scenery, Luna Allwen remained there for the longest time, Opal already howling with worry and longing. They would be okay, right? Caden had recovered quickly thanks to his wolf, and had sparred and trained with Alpha Landon the best he could do before the latter had gone. Him and his family were still on rather awkward speaking terms, but to be fair, they had every right to it after all that had transpired. He was around Sylvie the most, but this was more for the benefit of Corson and Soren, who had been apart for far too long, and were overjoyed to be reunited again. After Alpha Landon and Beta Elijah left, Luna Allwen took over most pack duties, with her subordinates, along with Delta Cassidy and Gamma Josh supporting her. Everyone had their own segments to focus on. Beta Stella worked most closely with Luna Allwen to overlook the movements of daily patrols, settle disputes and other concerns from pack members, and check on the development of programs and facilities around. Delta Cassidy and Delta Lincoln were both training the pack warriors, preparing them in case the Moon River pack was set upon while the Alpha and his Beta were away. And with the addition of warriors from the Silver Arrow pack, they needed to adjust and work together with their new pack mates. While they weren't warriors, Allwen continued to train the segment of Omegas that had come to her the week before. Gamma Josh worked with Kale to ensure the effectiveness of the new security measures for the Moon River pack, as well as heading the daily patrols himself. Josh was also helping with the installation of a monitoring room in the underground shelters beneath pack grounds, which would allow his mate to still have eyes and ears around pack territory despite not being physically there. Gamma Marissa was working together with Dr. Enzo on a secret project that Alpha Landon and Luna Allwen had assigned to them both. With the dirty tactics that some of their enemies were employing these days, they needed to test a failsafe. Throughout all this, Allwen knew that her mate was still on his way to the site, where he would face the Alpha of the once great Silver Arrow pack, whoever it was. And as she went to bed with Landon's scent still faintly on the sheets and pillows, all she could do was pray to the moon goddess that he would be all right. As Luna Allwen was finishing up one night, a soft knock resonated from her office door. "Come in," she said, shutting down her computer. To her curiosity, it was Caden who stepped into the room. "Luna Allwen." He bowed in respect, and she stood up and acknowledged him with a dip of her head. "Mr. Anderson. What can I do for you? I know that I am no longer Beta, and neither am I an official member of the Moon River Pack yet, but I hope that I can be allowed to accompany the pack warriors in training and patrols." Caden spoke. Luna Allwen considered this briefly before nodding. "I shall consider it, perhaps with supervision." And Caden hesitated, waiting for Allwen to look back up at him again before going on. "I'd like to formally apologize to you as well for everything that happened at the Silver Arrow pack." Allwen nodded, acknowledging this with a calm smile. "Thank you, but I've come to terms with my initial exile by now. It may have hurt me at first, but without it I may never have come to the Moon River pack or met Alpha Landon again. I am only relieved and thankful that you risked your life to come here and warn us of Aaron and Bradley's plan." She paused. "Have you heard anything of who replaced you in the Silver Arrow pack? The Beta is supposed to go with the Alpha to the challenge site." Caden frowned as he thought things over, before shaking his head. "No. The Silver Arrow pack has not made any official announcements since the function, not even the deaths of Jace and Edric. But given the transference of the Alpha title requires approval from the Beta as well, I can only guess it would be someone who would not dare to disagree with the Alpha." "And what of Aaron?" "The last I remember is that while Bradley would go to fight Alpha Landon, that Aaron was to stay behind in the Silver Arrow pack and select a Luna." "I see." A moment of silence passed before Allwen sighed heavily and got up. She felt almost pity for her former mate, considering the state that his pack was now in. Hopefully the next Luna is someone more restrained than Kylie. He should have learnt his lesson by now in that regard. She bid Caden good night before they both left her office. Arriving at the plains where the challenge was to take place, Alpha Landon and Beta Elijah both dismounted the car, heading towards the main site. Lark growled in Landon's mind, as they both recognized the visibly older man already waiting for them, with a shorter, fearful-looking young man that could only be his replacement for Beta Caden. A doctor, dispatched by the royal family as a neutral party to oversee the challenge, stood by. Alpha Bradley. Landon acknowledged, stopping opposite him. Alpha Landon. The lack of surprise on Landon's behalf didn't seem to faze the now reinstated leader of the Silver Arrow Pack. Despite having been retired for a few months, his physique hadn't deteriorated by much. He had brutally killed his Delta and Gamma after all. I have brought Beta Elijah as my second-in-command, and witness to this challenge. Landon spoke, as Elijah gave a swift nod behind him. And I have brought Beta Richard as my second-in-command and witness. Richard meekly nodded, a step away from practically shuddering in his boots. Landon almost felt sorry for him, given the abrupt and frankly intimidating circumstances that surrounded his appointment. After checking both of them thoroughly, it was determined that neither of them were carrying illegal items physically, or had substances in their system that would give them an advantage over the other. The doctor cleared his throat. Before we begin, I shall repeat the rules one more time as a reminder. He spoke, looking back and forth between the two alphas as they circled each other. The challenge will begin exactly when I say commence. Both alphas are required to stay within the boundaries of this area, and not use the forest or trees to their advantage. The challenge will end with either surrender or death, after which the victor will inherit the title of the strongest alpha, and receive the right for their pack to be declared the representative of the Evergreen Wilds in any official capacity henceforth. Any breaking of these rules will result in disqualification and forfeiture of the challenge. Do you both consent to these rules? I, Alpha Bradley Young of the Silver Arrow Pack, consent to these rules. Bradley spoke, his voice resonating through the clearing. I, Alpha Landon Cartwright of the Moon River Pack, consent to these rules. Landon said as well, watching the other man closely. Very well. The doctor nodded. With both beaters watching a safe distance away, he spoke again. You may both shift. Landon and Bradley headed a distance away to undress and shift into their wolves. As Lark took over his human's body, his sandy brown fur sprouting up, he caught a glimpse of Bastion. The deep grey wolf was slightly bigger than Lark with a few grey hairs here and there, but he looked no less fierce than Bradley. Lark stepped back into the clearing, both wolves stalking and circling each other, as they prepared for the doctor to give the word. Bastion bared his teeth in a threatening snarl, his deep red eyes glaring into Lark's very soul. He's trying to intimidate us. Landon spoke to his wolf. Don't back down. Lark returned the snarl, his yellow eyes glaring back at Bastion's. The other's gaze darkened further when it became clear that there was no backing away from this challenge now. Commence. Immediately, Bastion made the first move and lunged for the sandy wolf. At the same time, voices flooded the Moon River Pack mind link, most prominently from Kale. Luna Olwen, there are rogues closing in on the pack. They've appearing on every single camera stationed near each entrance. Tending to her garden outside her home, Luna Olwen felt her heart thud more quickly, as Opal already sensed the faint cloud of scents approaching. This wasn't a small band of rogues, this was an army. She'd anticipated something to occur while Alpha Landon was away, but not a rogue attack until this scale. She got up, preparing a glass of water and downing a small vial with it. Gamma Josh, Gamma Marissa, evacuate all vulnerable individuals and children to the underground shelter. Kale, go with them and monitor activity from there. Beta Stella, come to the main entrance and bring your father with you. Delta Cassidy and Delta Lincoln, protect the north and south entrances. All pack warriors, stay at your posts and do whatever you can to prevent the rogues from infiltrating the pack. Yes, Luna. All the voices chorused, shortly before all pack activity began to intensify like rapid-fire clockwork. Luna Olwen headed to the main entrance, where the existing warriors were already stationed. Sure enough, wolves with ragged, torn and dirt-matted fur were approaching the pack like a sea, closing in on the pack territory. Luna Olwen, you are the most important figure here. Beta Stella glanced at her with concern. Are you sure you shouldn't be in the shelter? Yes. I've trained for months, and I am more than confident that I know how to protect my pack. Very well. Stella nodded at her. If the rogues were all in wolf form, there was no chance of reasoning or negotiating with them. Olwen guessed that they could be remnants of Keith's followers from Priscilla's story, but why they were suddenly showing themselves after so long would have to wait. Situating herself at the head of her warriors, Luna Olwen shifted first, before Stella, Caden and the rest of the warriors did as well. Opal's eyes scanned the approaching rogues, multiple sets of eyes filled with rage and red water thirst. There was no clear leader amongst them, which was strange. Perhaps the leader would not make themselves known. Olwen suggested in their mind. Given Priscilla told us Keith was killed during the last rogue attacks. Flanking her, Star and Corson both growled protectively, baring their teeth at the intruders. After a tense silence, the moment was broken as one of the rogues lunged at Opal, only to be met by a mass of black as Star tackled him to the ground. The catalyst set off the rest of the wolves, who all surged forward and collided in a mass of fur and snapping jaws. Star emitted a particularly commanding howl, impressive for a beta. Take out any rogue who tries to get into the Moon River pack. Rolling out of the way, as her opponent attempted to claw open her belly, Star quickly latched onto and ripped out the wolf's throat. She had no time to feel any disgust or guilt at taking a life before pouncing onto the next rogue. Somewhere a distance away, Corson was doing the same, sinking his claws into a rogue's flank until red water pooled from the wound. He only stopped when he felt the rogue's grip on his fur loosen and slip away. Gamma Josh, once all pack members have been evacuated, head to the east gate and help to hold off the rogues there. Olwen linked. Yes, Luna. Opal herself was using her smaller size compared to some of the wolves to her advantage, easily weaving in and out of the sea of fighting creatures, assisting some of her warriors in disarming and taking down their opponents, and tricking some rogues into accidentally attacking their own, by the evasive maneuvers that Delta Cassidy had taught her. One particularly large wolf attempted to go for her throat, with Opal zipping out of the way such that his jaws accidentally tore into another rogue's, the other howling in pain. The adrenaline was pumping through her veins, with Olwen, despite not being in control, helping her wolf remain alert to all surroundings, and making split-second decisions. As she dug her claws into another wolf's flank, Opal howled as well, the sound carrying to the sky. We do not stop until the Moon River pack is safe. Those in the underground shelter huddled together, some of the children crying at the cacophony of fighting echoing faintly from above. Gamma Marissa in particular was embracing some of the children and trying her best to calm them down, some of the other Omegas, including Elise and Jessie, heading around to soothe the worries of some of the pack members. In his monitoring room, Kale's eyes flickered through the many cameras he had installed. There was fighting in so many of them, but fortunately for now, it seemed that the rogues were contained at the borders of pack territory, with no wolf having managed to infiltrate the pack itself yet. Kale's heart thumped in his chest as he recognized his friends and loved ones on the screens. Star, Opal and Corson disappeared and reappeared out of the cameras as they fought at the main entrance, with Cassidy's wolf Cerise and Lincoln's wolf Leo tussling with their own opponents, with the other pack warriors at the north and south entrances. His heart especially twinged with worry as he recognized Josh's wolf Janus pushing a rogue off himself before lunging back onto them. His jaw tightened as Janus sunk his teeth into their neck and tossed them side. Kale could not lose his mate today. Movement on one of the cameras near the main entrance caught Kale's eye. A dark shape that appeared to have arrived at a different time than the rest of the rogues, was slowly stalking towards the mass fighting with gleaming eyes. Instead of attacking the nearest pack warrior, however, he seemed fixated on one particular wolf locked in a struggle with her opponent. Kale's eyes widened in recognition, and he hurriedly sent out a mind link. Luna Olwen, to your left. Above ground, Opal had just about registered Kale's warning when the rogue, who was attempting to pin her, was suddenly knocked off her. The culprit then grabbed her by the scruff of her neck and dragged the silvery grey wolf away from the fighting with shocking strength and speed. Opal howled and struggled, but any pack member who tried to come to her aid was either preoccupied or held off by other rogue wolves. A good distance away, she could see both Star and Corson trying to reach her. A particular scent she hadn't expected today flooded Opal's nose as she was dragged to the edge of the river bordering the pack, after which Opal tore free of the wolf's grasp and spun around to face him. It was ours, all right. But something was off. The larger wolf was stalking towards Opal slowly, his teeth bared. His eyes, rather than their usual orange, were Aaron's green, and as they trained on Opal the wolf looked crazed. Opal stood her ground and readied a fighting stance, but beneath all that Olwen's heart was pounding. Aaron, Opal growled, staring at her former mate in his wolf's body with horror. What have you done? Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.